Hello and welcome to another episode of Mixtape. We are joined by Shanal Kazi. And in this episode, we are going to keep things a bit more casual. If you guys remember in the first episode when we had like a couple of my friends over, Shanal mentioned a few of her uh, memories from her work experience working with in the Thar area. So, given that she also has a personal connection with the area, and given that we hardly get to see, other than the issues of that region, we hardly get any other stories from that area, the culture, the religion, the any other social aspect of that region in the mainstream media. So we decided that we'll have her over so she can share what in her from her viewpoint what Thar really means, what it has to offer, and all things in between. So welcome back, Shana.
Hi, Fatma. Really great to be here and back at on the mixtape. Yeah, I really enjoyed it the last time, and it's great that we have this medium to be able to converse with each other and kind of share stories. And I remember the last time that I was on, we were talking about storytelling, and I think I just kind of deviated from that and became kind of spoke about my own way of how I learned storytelling and how that's so important for me. Yeah, I mean, as far as my experiences are concerned, at uh, I used to be at a obviously a well-known company in Pakistan called Engro. We were working for the Thar coal reserves and extraditing those reserves in order to make electricity. And during that, I was looking after the corporate social responsibility, the community development angle of all of it. And and we've discussed this so many times in random conversations, and while meeting, and I have shared with you several kinds of experiences that I learned from that. I really feel that it that was probably the experience that really changed my personality. It allowed me to understand so much about other people that were not even remotely part of my life, or that I think would be part of my life. And yet I felt, seemingly they were all strangers from the start. And um, we were, representing a big company, kind of was daunting on one side, but also exhilarating because, on one side you were seen, it was a two-edged sword, right? Because on one side you were like looking at, okay, so we can change things for you. On the other side, there were people there that had heard this for decades and decades from different companies and just weren't believing the fact that there was some change going to be brought on. And like you mentioned, and how we've been talking about this for so long, it's so great that we're now doing it on this panel and this platform, that it's basically, Thar is basically very, very sacred to me. I think that yes, it has a lot to do with the fact that my paternal family is from there. It has a lot to do with the fact that my father was born there. Um, it was and is a very derelict place, and um, but all I grew up hearing, and all throughout my life, my first visit to Thar was probably when I was a couple of years old. I then went on just recreationally for a visit with my entire family, maybe when I was, early teens. And, those were just touch and goes, not really exploring what the place had in score. But my whole life, all I heard was in Thar, when we were young, this would happen. When there was a wedding, this would happen. These were the traditions, these were the things. And there were so many stories that I grew up on that I was so intrigued about this place, and and my family, my paternal family and my paternal extended family, in some way always has such a deep connection to the fact that they were from Thar, from a city called Diplo. And Most of the residents of that, most of the educated residents of that village, or now that it's a township, uh, sort of were educated, and then unfortunately, and that's a bone that I pick with my father and his siblings quite a bit, is that, why did you leave? Like, my father himself, it's ironic because, you know, I remember taking my first trip to Thar with Engro, and I remember sitting in, a company car, highly privileged sort of protocol, had an agenda to do, but as I entered the border of between Sindh or and Thar, what you can say is that's what the locals in Thar say, that when you tell them you're from Hyderabad or Mirpur Khas, anywhere else, they say, oh, that's not, that's Sindh and that's not Thar. And it's very interesting that they make that distinction, because Thai in itself is so full of its own traditions that it doesn't borrow so many from Sindh itself. And I remember going back to the point, I remember getting into my car, a company car, being so excited, 6 a.m. in the morning. And, my boss at the time, who passed away while we were working, a few years into the job, um, you know, he would tell me all these fascinating stories as well. And it was my first trip down. And from then on, I practically lived there. But I remember as we drove through and entered that border of Thar, and the landscape changed. The landscape changed completely. It was such a chilling and goosebump kind of inducing feeling that, oh my God, like I'm here. Like there was this, it's strange because I've never felt this. I've never felt um, connected, and I never felt that I would be so emotional. But the only thing that in my mind was going on was, Dada Baba, I'm here, and I'm here, and it's strange, and that I'm here so many more decades after, you know, you left and you came and you went, and I'm here coming back, full circle. It's like destiny and fate would have it that I would come back here and serve the people of Thar. Um, and in doing so, I started off with Engro at a very, very early stage, where nothing had really happened on ground, whether with the coal mining or the power plant, or even with the people. I mean, there wasn't much community mobilization being done at that point. And um, I think that was the best time to come in, because if everything was ready and done and I had to just come and run schools and hospitals and do all of that, I wouldn't have had the community interaction that I would have had. I wouldn't have been able to relive all those stories of traditions that my father grew up telling me. Um, and it's so funny that, some, I don't know, 71, 72 years ago, my father being 18 months old, kind of took a journey with his family to move from Diplo and Thar to Hyderabad for further education. And, my grandfather was a corporate lawyer, and he wanted to establish his practice in Hyderabad, which is obviously a better off city um, than having done so in Thar. But having said that, my grandfather did a lot for Thar, and specifically for education, and a lot for female education. And I felt that there was a great onus on me to do for the company. And a lot of the times I found myself in situations where people said, in the company, we've done a lot, this is more than most companies do, this is more than most oil and gas or energy sector companies do. But, okay, fine, we've taken note of what you need. And I think it was so ironic that I came back some 70 years after in a proper SUV car, whatever, to give back to the community. And it's ironic that just 72 years ago or 70 years ago, my dad had left, made the very same journey, and repeatedly made the same journey on camel's back. It really is, and every time there was a wedding, he would go there, talk about traditions, talk about unity, talk about literature, talk about so much. And I think the main point of this conversation today, and obviously you can follow up and build from that, is, the kind of the kind of learnings that that experience gave me in interacting with people, and obviously, Fatma, you know that when we think of Thar, we think, or on the common man thinks of Thar and opens the TV, and we see year after year, drought and no rain, and kids dying and women dying, and high rise infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate. But um, what what no one really talks about is the fact that there is so much that that land has to offer. Yes, difficulties aside, but you never see anybody uh, who is constantly talking about their difficulties. You will see people that are hospitable. You will see people who are literary. You will see people who are Sufi. You'll see great amount of music. You will see a lot of literature from Shah Abdul Latif Bhatai was actually inspired from Thar and the land of Thar. The whole story of um, Umar and Marvi. Thar is the birthplace of so much culture, and I was so lucky to be able to, through the company that I worked for, to be able to not only just be part of, hey, make this school, make this college, do this hospital, do that, but actually just I had to start from ground zero, literally walk into people's houses, sit with them, sit on the floor, eat food with them, break bread with them, have tea with them. Sometimes they would get viciously angry about what was happening and what the company or what they foresaw the company would do. And we obviously had nothing on ground until we got financial closure and had finances to bring the project. But we really brought in community mobilization way earlier, just so that we could get acquainted. And I'm so fortunate to have been at the forefront of that, because that was an experience of a lifetime, really.
The thing that you specified here is something that I think we really need to take note is that as a country, we know how it feels when you are defined by your problems alone. um, this has happened in global mainstream media, but if you, I don't know if you want to call it ironic or what, but we do this locally as well, because as I said in the start as well, Thar is more than, it has to be more than its problems, just like any other area. But all we see locally when Thar is mentioned to someone who's not acquainted with that place, just I believe that you ask anybody in Punjab or in the northern areas, mention Thar, and it always be, the list of problems that we see in the media that are conveyed, that that area has XYZ problems. Hardly its cultural significance, its diversity is mentioned. So you share the, how you have a personal connection because of your family roots. um, just sort of paint a picture, because one of the things that you mentioned was very interesting when you said that they consider it sort of a border when you cross the Sindh and Hyderabad area. Anyone here would just, when say Thar, would say, yeah, part of the Sindh province, but they feel that they have enough, cultural differences to consider that they don't, you sort of borrow anything from the overlapping culture of Sindh. So what was your experience? You said the minute you crossed the first time you visited as an adult. Can you just paint a picture of how the geography changes and how that has an impact on some of the key cultural points that maybe we don't get to know or hear about commonly?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's one of those things where you don't, I never really realized that they had a distinction between Sindh and Thar, and I remember thinking, like we're from Sindh, we're like you say in Sindhi, asa Sindhi aayu. But the thing is that which means we're all Sindhi, but they used to say no, 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 Sindh is that, we're Thar. And I used to kind of find that I would give it a little bit of a I don't think I would take that statement so with such importance initially when I first came to Thar and started working there. as much as I realized that no, it's a complete different world. And it's, honestly, I'll tell you one thing. And I'm not just saying this because I have a bias and I'm from the area, because as you can see, I was so disconnected from the area in terms of physical, kind of, it's not like I used to go visit the area, or that, there was a home there or a family thing. Everything had moved to Hyderabad I mean, way before. When my dad was in his, toddler years and teenage years, it was all about Hyderabad. And yes, they used to go back and forth to Thar. So saying this without any kind of bias is that there the culture in Thar is so widely, it's such a treasure chest that if you keep digging, literally keep talking to people, keep finding out things, keep understanding what it is. Not only are there about 4 or 5 different dialects that exist there, which are completely different from Sindhi. So it's not that, okay, this is a dialect of Sindhi. Because, sometimes what happens is that in southern Sindh, there's people speak Sindhi, but with a different, kind of grammar. But it's still understandable for the people who live in the north, who have a different dialect. But it's still a dialect of the same language. Here in Thar, it's a vast desert terrain, which is so spread out, with about 1.5 million as the population. So it's completely scattered. For the area that it is, the population is so very, very, sparsely scattered out. And um, yet they have, whether it comes to the way they dress, the way they speak. Again, I mean, I struggled to understand 4 different dialects when I was there, because um, some part of Thar, and again, in Thar also you have 5 different areas. So, like 5 mini provinces or talkas, you would say, and all 5 of them have a complete different landscape. So you enter, you see the most outstanding thing, and the one thing that when I entered Thar, when I was coming in with anger, was one thing that my boss had told me, and that I also kind of knew, was that it's not like a desert. It's not like any other desert. It's one of the most green deserts that one has ever seen. And that excitement was something that every time I would bring a visitor, and because our work was such that we had to bring a lot of visitors, we had to bring a lot of people who were from different NGOs, we had to bring a lot of people that were from, like, say, if we worked with TCF, or we worked with Indus Hospital, or we worked with different kind of partner organizations. Initially, when we did all our feasibility studies and took them to the villages and took them to meet the people and see our facilities, and how dire, like, situations were, I think I was always more excited than the visitor, to be like, look at this, the landscape is changing, and it's a desert. And they used to be like, but this is really not a desert. There's flowers here, there's trees here, it's greenery. And that's the magic. I always found Thar to be such a mystical, magical place. But then there were some areas of Thar which were completely, as you reach the border of India, with India, in an area called Nagar Parker, which Nagar Parker is the bordering sort of, you can say, talka between, and the Indian border slices through from there, and it gets into Gujarat from there in India. And that terrain is completely different. It's got a beautiful mountain range that goes from Nagar, starts from Nagar Parker, and goes on to Thar, goes on to India. And I think it's like a 20 something mile long mountain range, and it's made of pink granite. So it's actually a pink mountain, and it's made out of granite. And now, of course, there's commercial activity going on to explore that and exploit that, and God knows what else. But it is a complete different landscape the minute, every place you go in Thar, there is no, you can't say this place looks like the same as the other. You can't say that person that I met in Mithi, which is the capital of Thar, is basically kind of like the same person I met in Diplo, which is my hometown, or a person that you met in Islam Court. And I think all along, what we try to do, and what I think that everyone tries to do this, and I think that we're all culprits in this, is we try to box and compartmentalize, uh, sort of cultures, and we say कि हाँ ये अगर थर के हैं या ये अगर सिंध के हैं, so they're all like this, they're all the same. And no, from the dressing to the language to the food. I mean, to be honest with you, yes, the whole of the country waits for monsoon because it's something that we rarely get. But when Thar sort of sparks a little bit of lightning and shows even a tiny bit of rain, it's so exciting. I mean, I have house help who is from Thar. We've always had that because they're from our village, and it's all interconnectivity and all of that. Um, and literally, the minute you find out कि कराची में तो बारिश हो रही है, but अगर थार में शुरू होगी, none of them want to stay at home. They all get, like ants in their pants, and they're like, okay, we just want to go back home. We just want to go back home. And we're like, well, what is it? What is this magical time that's in Thar? But honestly, for anybody who has ever seen monsoon in Thar, will know that it transforms. Literally, it takes about 2 days and little bit of rain for it to become, for that green place, which is, I'd say green for someone else's eyes, but not too green for the people from Thar, because they rely solely on livestock and livestock agriculture and all that kind of stuff. But every year there are actual prayers, there are actual sing songs, there's dances, there's stuff that you don't see, and it's just simple joys like rain and monsoon that change the mood everywhere. Everyone's loving the rain. Everyone's so glad the rain's come. It's a place where, it's a place full of unity. It's a place where there's probably, if at the time that I was there was a 1% crime rate, maybe 2% crime rate. I don't know if that's changed after commercial activity, after I left the company. I have no idea. But from what I still hear, it's one of those places that चाहे आप शहर में जाएं मिट्टी में, या चाहे आप गांव में जाएं, the question of someone stealing something from you does not exist. And I think every single person does not need to lock their door at night. Nobody really bothers. All night long, people are sitting by the sidewalks. If you're talking about the city of Mitti, and that's another story that I'll go into, and I'll tell you how I've celebrated lots of good religious festivals or just general festivals in the city of Mitti, which is, more of an affluent-ish city compared to the rest of Thar, because it has a lot of Hindu merchant population, and they're quite well off. They're businessmen, so they're quite well off. Um, and I think, you know, what we see on TV, like you mentioned, is really sad. It's really sad, and it's highly politicized. There is no other way to explain it. There'll be cry for funds. There'll be, kids being shown in situations which I think personally is complete invasion of privacy. I mean, this is not what represents Thar. This is not what represents their culture. There are people there who are, elderly, who can recite the entire Shahja Risala for you. So, I mean, there are people who can sing songs for you in the most beautiful voice, and those songs and I mean, there are instruments that were invented in Thar, string instruments that don't exist anywhere. And every year that I go to Thar, for some reason or the other, after I've left Engro, what happens is that I see less and less of it. So everyone's resorted to the million Bollywood channels that they get, or the million, dramas that they get, but no one really wants to listen to any cultural music. Nobody wants to have these things that were called much kacheris, which is, you surround yourself by the fire if it's winter time, and you share stories, and then the other person picks up on that story and shares another story. So what's that? I'm also trying to kind of say, there is so much culture there, but there is, just like everywhere else in Pakistan, this shame to admit that we have all of that culture. And what my fear is, and has always been, and more so now that I'm not part of Engro, and more so now that I'm not, there, and I only go there after long periods of time, maybe 6 months, every 6 months, or every 4 months. I see so much change in that people are like, you know, we'd rather just not make this at home. We'd rather just get it from the market. And I think these kind of traditions are dying. And whenever I go to somebody's house, and I would still go to their house, I'd still go to their village, I'd still sit down with them, and I'd tell them, no, I want something from the house, whatever you have. And they'd insist on getting me Mountain Dew, Mirinda, Fanta, God knows what, but they won't really. Maybe they have all that pride in their culture, but maybe it's just something that's dying with every generation. you know Everything being digitized, everything, you know money pouring into industry is a great thing because it provides jobs and employment, but it's not necessarily great because who's going to take care of the culture? Every time I go, there are beautiful old Jain mandirs which date back over maybe 800 to 1,000 years old, every time in more dilapidated state than they have ever been. And that is very depressing because who's going okay, you're going to you're going to give people jobs, and you're going to make an industry, and there's going to be opportunity for business vendors to open up different supermarkets, and there's going to be so much of that. But who in the world is going to sit there and say, you know what, I want to repair this temple? Because not only does Jainism barely exist in this world in its true form, but the fact that there are relics still there, their mandirs still there, hand painted, you know, stone carved, and they just are in such a shoddy state. You can do anything you want to bring prosperity to a nation, but every nation in the world and every culture in the world can only last so long as its antiquities, as its heritage sites, as its history is preserved and taken pride of. Unfortunately, as a nation, we've lost that in many ways around in the city. But that's something that really, in my heart, I feel should not be lost in Thar. And the portrayal of the government and the politicization of, oh, it's Thar, it's drought, so people are dying. And so just for my years that I worked in Thar, and I was very closely aligned with health authorities and all of that stuff, and little said about government institutes and facilities there, the better. But to be very honest with you, I really did not see that the drought every year, every other year, was really the root cause of people's malnutrition, of people's, illnesses. It was just a cycle of, obviously, a generational cycle of people who were, if you have in your genetics weaknesses and, anemia and, don't have proper facilities that can provide you childbirth, and most births are taking place at home, in unsanitary conditions, then obviously you will have malnutrition children, and you will obviously have all those kinds of things that happen. And I think that's a very politicized thing because one government wants to benefit in some way, shape, or form, get a bigger budget, which they have, and yet nothing really gets reflected in the hospitals that you see in Thailand, which is sad.
Yeah, because as you said, the issues in drought, definitely, it is an issue, but it's not just a Thar issue. It's climate change. It's having an impact everywhere in Pakistan and around the world. And yeah, the issues can't just be thrown on. The problems can't be just attached to one specific problem. As you were mentioning about the images of the children that come out of Thar, it just reminded me of a bit that Trevor Noah did in one of his stand-up comedies. When Africa and Africa has been portrayed by even by international INGOs in a very specific manner around the world, and he made the joke because
Mm-hmm.
there was this one specific image that's we all have seen it. We see it every time there's something aid related about that area, and that is a
Mm-hmm.
kid, a malnutritioned kid, who has a fly literally going in and outside his mouth. And he was like, we are poor, sure, but we can
Yeah.
be, no matter how much poor we are. And he did this action with his hand. He said, we can actually, you can, make a fly go away with your hand. It has nothing to do with wealth. But that specific image has, I think, been the poster child for what Africa stands for the entire world until I think digital media, where then people started talking about, what sort of biases these are. Um, you mentioned a lot about, the cultural aspect of it, and that's where I want to like take this conversation, because I myself am very much interested in documenting um these unique aspects of our cultures, be it anywhere. And the fact that we are losing these unique musical instruments, these oral storytelling traditions, is really really heartbreaking. And I think I think you anybody who's listening can figure this out, that I think the reason those people don't are not actually transferring it to the next generation is because of there is no financial support on that front.
Yeah.
There's this documentary, I am totally forgetting its name, but there's this recently started, I think, organization of local filmmakers. Haya Fatma is also part of it. Um, and they did a virtual, this film festival. And one of the documentaries that they showcased was basically highlighting the musical instruments,
Yeah, I
the
think
local.
that was Chalta Phirta Documentary
Yes, yes,
Association. Yeah, I
yes.
watched that. That was heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you remember there was this one documentary. I'm totally forgetting its name, but it's really stuck with me. I think Indus Blues. Yes.
Yes, yes. It was about
Yes,
the
yes.
musical instruments all over Pakistan and how they were dying,
Exactly.
whether that's Punjab or that was
Exactly.
the northern
Exactly.
areas or Sindh. Yeah, absolutely remember watching
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And the one of the people featured from one of the wall city, he was comparing the situation of a specific instrument is that is a heritage of South Asia, basically specifically Pakistan and India. And he said, um there what he said, that what he got to know was that there people who are involved in this work, they how they get their children into it is that they have toys of that musical instrument,
Mm.
and they keep
Mhm.
these kids, like 3-year-old 4-year-old kids, use those toy, start practicing on those toy instruments. And here I think he was the only one who was left with that instrument. So that is something that we really really need at a government level, at an individual level, be it non-profits or corporate. When we talk about CSR, I think this is an aspect that we really need to focus on. So, talking about these, because you have witnessed these and you have heard stories from your father, just share some actual, maybe events or musical, any experiences that you have had that you can share.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest eye opener was the kind of, and I'll share a few anecdotes because they point to different aspects of my surprise in Thar. And one of them being is that, there is such a sense of liberty over there. I cannot walk um, in Karachi, in most big countries in Pakistan, with no one looking at me, no one caring where I'm from, no one caring, oh, she doesn't look like she's from here. I mean, I remember I'm a very, when it comes to adventure and it comes to, just trying to figure out things, I'm very much like, I want to go off and do it on my own. And that's how I've learned and made friends there. And I have families there who, if I go to Thar and family finds out that I'm in Mithi and I haven't met the other family, it becomes a problem. The thing is that, you know, it's, I've literally, I don't know any place, forget Pakistan. I don't know any place in the world that just allows you to ring the bell, not even ring the bell. The door is open. You walk in. When you honestly, like when you walk into Thar and and walk in through. Sorry, I'm not talking about Thar per se. The villages, that's the sense of privacy that you try to keep. But if it's cities like Islam Court or Mithi, and especially Mithi, which I've spent a lot of my time in because when you're working, say 16, 17 hours a day, you just need a break and you want to head to, you know, uh, a city which is not really a city, but it has character, but it also has just people that are, people that you can kind of you become friends with. You need friends if you're going to be. I mean, practically, I spent most of my, I spent 4 years in Engro. I spent more than I spent a lot of time in Thar, weeks at a stretch, days at a stretch. And the only way, of course, I could get by in many ways, but I used to feel suffocated in a way in the company compound and all of that. Not that it was not great, it was amazing. I mean, but I just felt like I wasn't experiencing true Thar. And there's a lot of my colleagues used to make fun of me and say, oh, now you just want to go out in the evening and you just want to go to the city and meet your friends and that kind of stuff and you want to go and meet Thari families. What do you even talk to them about? What do you even say? Like, how can you relate to them? And I said, I can relate to them more than I can relate to you people. I don't want to sit here and play basketball and football and table tennis and whatever. I want to go and I want to meet people. And one of the most baffling things for me has been that I would have the company driver and he would I would tell him, यहाँ पे बाजार में ही मिट्टी के बाजार में आप गाड़ी पार्क कर लें और एक गली में बस ये जो मेन बाजार जहाँ से शुरू हो रहा है वहाँ पे आप मुझे छोड़ दें एंड आप यहीं पे गाड़ी पार्क करें मैं थोड़ा सा बाजार बाजार में जाऊँगी एंड लुकिंग एट हिम हिज पजल्ड फेस लाइक नहीं बाजी ऐसे है तो आप नहीं कर सकती है ये तो जगह सही नहीं मैंने कहा आप छोड़ें ये जगह जितनी सही है वहाँ पे यहाँ पे कोई there's no place in Pakistan जो कि इतनी safe होगा. So he would park the car and he would insist on following me कि मैं आपसे दूर दूर बैठ के चल के फिरूं like follow करूंगा but I was like no there's no such need and I would go through the gullies and gullies of the busy Mithi Bazaar and it would be so nice like in the mornings honestly and I've written a lot about this I haven't published anywhere because frankly again there's a really lack of places where you can publish such works and people would be interested in reading about it. But you walk in and it's 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. because sometimes I would be there for the weekends too. And sometimes out of choice, I would stay in Thar for the weekends. I didn't want to come back to Karachi and I didn't want to do what the socializing that's done over here. I just wanted to be, still and obviously Sundays used to be a holiday. So I would get up and go early morning to Mithi and I would it was just a sight to look after to look over because जब आप वॉक करते थे बाजार में और सुबह सुबह सवेरे लाइक एक बंदा होता था डेडिकेटेडली जो कि पूरे and Mithi is a predominantly Hindu city, right? 70 or 80, I think 70% for now are are Hindus over there, and it's probably the only city in Pakistan like that. एंड सुबह को जो आरती होती है एंड जो स्मोक भरा एक कंटेनर होता है जिसमें से वो अपनी देयर इज अ डेडिकेटेड मैन इन मिठी जो कि वो पूरे मिठी बाजार को वो आरती और वो स्मोक जला के पूरा उसको ही स्टॉप्स एट एवरी शॉप ही blow smoke over all of those things he's praying he's blessing those people and this is something that I saw every time every morning I would go to Mithi I would see that the bakery is opening people are looking people are talking people are greeting you and the idea of some random person greeting you in Karachi where I live is just the automatic thing would be why is this person greeting me or why is this person walking into my house or walking into my shops but there were so many times I would just walk into people's houses and say you have a very nice house the veranda is really nice play with the kids a little bit the amma would come out the abba would come out I wouldn't even have to ring a bell there was no bell there was just nothing you just walk into the houses doors would be open sooner or later little giggly girls would be out and teenage girls who would look up to me and be like do you have WhatsApp do you have sort of what's your number can we keep your number and I still hear from them from time to time I've not given them anything I've not ever once brought anything for them because there's so many people I've not the only thing is I've given them the my time and my company which frankly I can give to a lot of people, but that they would not appreciate that in a city as much as they would over there. And sometimes they just write to me and they say, "When are you coming back?" And all of those things. And then you'll have your, I remember sitting in a silver दुकान जहाँ पे सिल्वर ज्वेलरी बेचते हैं पूरी चांदनी मार्केट है इन मिठी बाजार and वहाँ पे आप बैठे हुए हैं, and I should just literally just be so candid. I would sit on the floor, and वो jewelry वाला बोलता था कि आप कुर्सी पे बैठे हैं, आप क्या कर रही हैं, ज़मीन पे क्यों बैठी हैं, and I would just sit there and I would just pick out what I needed, what I wanted, go to textile people, be friends with them, just haggle with them, have a good time. And really, it was not the fact that I was giving them money or the fact that I was giving them jobs where I was working. I was very strict about the fact that, look, I do work at Engro, and unfortunately, you do know that I do that. But I'm not here to kind of give jobs, because we had a huge line of CVs and we were already employing a lot of Tharis. So I can't, if you give me your CV, I'll take it, but I can't promise you anything. But even then, respect after respect. I mean, I've left there now, it's been a good 3 years or so, and I still get calls and I still get messages. And I mean, I was there last year for Diwali. I try to make it a point to be there for every Diwali, and it was probably with give or two one that got left in the middle. I went for Diwali to Mithi, and it just turns into a city that I've never ever. It's honestly my favorite city in the world, and I've been through so many cities around the world. But I would say that जितना coexistence Mithi या Thar में है for different religions, it's it's embarrassing that Pakistan as a whole does not have that coexistency pointer. I mean, if I decide that I want to go to inside a mandir in Karachi, I'll probably be stopped, unfortunately, because it has so many security threats and so many things. I would probably have to talk to somebody to let me in. But in Thar, Diwali is open to all, whether the Muslims enjoy it just as much the night. You're walking through the streets, and literally, I have taken people with me to Diwali, and they can speak for me when I say this, that it's absolutely incredible how they celebrate, how they welcome you into their houses. I've gone into random people's houses in Mithi in the city, and seeing how they've made had decorated their houses. They don't let you leave their house until you have so much to eat, and then you're on to the next house. They force the same kind of food and hospitality on you. And they are it's amazing because there's certain vegetables and certain dishes that, again, don't exist in Sindh. People in Sindh have never heard about these vegetables. I talk to anybody in Sindh, they'd be like, what is that? Those vegetables only come out in Thar, whether it rains, whether there's this, whether there's that. There's a few vegetables, and they make the most amazing, and they're all vegetarian because it's predominantly Brahmin, or so the upper caste Hindus. And the way they make their vegetables is the way they spoil you, their hospitality, it's just amazing. And I think that every house you go to, everyone is just so hospitable. That the one thing that I have received from all the friends that I have taken over the years is, wow, what kind of, like, I feel like I was, who was I? Like, was I the queen? Was I the king? That I got so much respect and love. And the thing is that you're nothing. You just give them, they love you just because you give them time and you give them respect, and you come over to their house, and they love being hospitable. It's just who they are. And I think that's beautiful. It doesn't exist. Something about Mithi, that if Muslims enjoy Diwali, they enjoy it as much. Pataka, जलाना है, ये करना है, वो करना, और उतने ही sort of with so much jest and so much, like, fun, they will enjoy the Hindus will enjoy Eid. They will greet each other. Agar Ashura hoga, so the Hindus will make sure कि उनकी बाजारें बंद होंगी. वो join करेंगे जलूस में. Agar, for example, Bakra Eid, there's no concept of cows being slaughtered, because there is respect for the Muslims and towards the Hindus, knowing that that's a sacred animal in their religion. And it's just beautiful. I mean, I think that kind of coexistence does not exist. That kind of harmony does not exist.
I mean, in the world, not just in Pakistan, but everywhere in the world, specifically with the recent events, uh, starting from United States of America, the stories that you are telling can actually, can be used as an example that, in this world which is with each passing day seems like to be, going towards a more polarized uh, version of itself, but still coexistence can happen, and we have a practical example. We don't have to go into history or you know come up with any new ideas about it. um, you mentioned some of the folklore, that there are people who can actually recite from their memory. So just share a bit more about it, and a couple of you touched in the start. You touched upon some of the folklores that have originated from Thar. Were you able to sit down with somebody who um, could give you more insight or give you more origin stories that we might not know? And also, um, as you also we talked about this a bit earlier, that there is a lack of documentation, or the fact that even within the community, nobody in this treasure is not being passed on to the next generation. Were you able to sit down with somebody and maybe talk about that, why was this happening? We know a couple of major pointers, obviously, because there's no financial support, and people need to have like financial support to be able to focus on these things. But
Mm.
other than that, do they have any ideas, or any ways in which they, if they are provided help, that they can be there is a chance that these store I know you mentioned the Jain Mandir wali cheese, and obviously that requires government attention, and we don't see that happening anytime soon. But these oral traditions, these stories, these musical instruments, how is there a way that we can help preserve those?
To be honest with you, I think that it needs to be in some way, shape, or form part of the curriculum. And um, I think that's one solid way for children that are growing up to not look at, Shah Rukh Khan. I mean, there's no harm in looking at Shah Rukh Khan or God knows who other actors are out there at the moment in Bollywood as role models, but they have so many Thari and yes, Sindhi role models to look after. So the folklore that I was talking about is basically Shah Abdul Latif Bhatai, a renowned poet in Sindh, who is buried in Bhicha, very close to Hala, and he has, every evening at his shrine there is sort of musicians that gather and they recite his risalo, and his risalo is meant to be a compilation of a certain amount of folk stories which are not too long and are written in very very old scripture type English with sorry Sindhi, which is very difficult for one person to understand. So even if there's a fluent Sindhi speaker, like say my father or my paternal family, they will not they be there'll be some words that will still puzzle them, and because and it's solid literature because it, like so many English literature that we read or Urdu literature that we read, one word or one sentence doesn't always mean the same thing. There's multiple interpretations. So if they're talking about light or they're talking about soil or they're talking about the sun, it means so many different things and can be interpreted as meaning so many different things. So what you would get out of one of his stories, say in particular the one that I mentioned, which is particular to Thar, and it's called Sur Mari, and it's about story of Umar and Marvi. So Umar was this, this is what the legend goes by, that Umar is basically this, sort of prince, or yeah, Umar was a prince, and he basically was going through, a village, and he found basically, he was going through all these villages, and he found, he saw a girl, and she was taking, water from a well, and it was in a small village which still exists in Thar, and there's the well still exists. And it's this village of Bhalwa, and it's on the road towards Islamkot to Nagar Parker. And what happens in the story is that he finds her so beautiful that he kidnaps her and he sort of takes her back to Umarkot, and he puts her in his fort, and he forces her to just agree to marry him, or to agree to just have some love for him. But the whole time, she's there's the whole story kind of narrates how she misses the people of Thar. She misses her, she talks about every flower that exists in Thar, every vegetable that exists. She talks about the cow, she talks about wells, she talks about how lovely her people are. She talks about how um, she longs to return to her land. She longs to return to be doing the thing. She misses monsoon. She misses the onset of spring. She misses winter. And that whole thing, it's not really a love story, but it is actually, kind of a ode to Thar. Every sentence in it and every, message in it is kind of like an ode to Thar, in a way that it and those are the stories. And there's another very famous folk story, basically called Mumal Rano, which is, on again two people, which is a love story, it's a love saga. And there are people who have not translated, but have just transcribed those poetries into songs. And there's and Mumal Rana is one of the poems that have turned into whose verses that have turned into a song that is sung by a lot of musicians. And the tradition is that I didn't even know this before I went with her, is that when I remember meeting a few musicians and they were singing a lot of things. And growing up, I always knew Rano, that's the folklore. It's 7-8 minute long, maybe even longer if you want to make it kind of uh, song or whatever. And it tells you the whole story between Mumal and Rano. And I told one of those musicians, I said, can you play that? I really like that because it's reminiscent of my childhood, and my dad would always ask for it. Um, and he said, no, 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 I can't do that. When I end my musical sort of repertoire or whatever it is, after I'm done with 5 or 6 songs, Rano is always sung at the end, and it's meant to be a song that you end by, because it's so heavy in its composition and so meaningful that you can't just sing it in the middle and have something sung after that. And as far as people, I mean, this is not even too far from right now. There are people that used to work in my household, obviously elderly, who are now retired and back in their villages, who could recite, they call it Bait, who could recite the Bait of Shah Abdul Latif Bhai, just out of pure memorization. And I think that's because, they used to have sit downs, they used to talk to each other, they used to actually be sharing, like, you have mashairas and stuff. This is how it used to work. And I think that if that cannot happen within the younger generation, then in some way, shape or form, it should be instilled and translated into curriculums, children's books, and not in a superficial manner where you're just trying to patronize the story and change the story altogether, but giving them pride that your heroes are actually these people. Like, I don't think kids know that. But then again, over there, there's so many problems that one has to go through that I don't think the kids are even responsible for not knowing these things. That they do, yes. Whereas Thara is not just all about problems, there are great problems that exist, and mothers are not able to sit down, or fathers are not able to sit down. Well, I would say more mothers are not able to sit down, because honestly, if you see the way a woman works in Thar, you would be surprised. When you talk about woman empowerment, I think the most empowered woman I've ever seen in my life have been Thari women. They make all the shots in the house. Yet they're not allowed to obviously make the real shots in the house, because it's the men who, unfortunately, you know, sit all day, drink tea, chat on their phones, boss things around, and kind of do. It's the women who do all the hard manual labor. If it's firewood being brought in from miles away, it's on their backs. If it's water being carried in, it's on their heads. And I have put a matka on my head, an empty matka on my head. I know how heavy that is. I don't know how they balance it with full matkas. If it's food that needs to be cooked, if it's, you know, sort of ज़मीनों पे काम करना और crops को मतलब निकालना और हार्वेस्टिंग करना और सारा कुछ ये सब औरतें करती हैं and at the same time they do it when they're pregnant, they do it when they have little kids, they do it in all kinds of ways. So I think women I've seen are the most empowered there, maybe that's not a right definition of empowerment, but I think that they have a lot more power and a lot more um, duties, yes, on them. And I think that it's just maybe that's why the culture cannot, is not able to move forward because it's not a shared parental system, right? Where the mother at the end of the day, when she's done with her work and all of that, she's tired. She doesn't really have the time. And it's likewise, embroideries have been minimized to almost a zero. Kind of it's just before, earlier in the day, my father used to tell me, and I've also seen this in the evenings when they'd all be done with their work, all the women would gather around from different houses, come to one house, work on a rally, patchwork, गाने गाते हुए वो काम करती थी उस पे. अब वो चीज़ है ही नहीं, बिकॉज वो सब वही कपड़ा पहनते हैं जो बाजार में अवेलेबल है, कोई हाथ से नहीं बनाता है चीज़ें, बहुत चीज़ें ये कम हो गई हैं, चाहे एम्ब्रॉयडरी हो चाहे कल्चर हो. And I think it's just because they do live a tough life, and the burdens are not shared between the mother and the father, or the husband and the wife. And I think it's a very disproportionate system of putting so much on a woman, and then expecting her kids to then also have the education of all of these poetries, and be a little um, cognizant of the cultures that existed and the country, the province or the area grew up on, right? And that makes the traditions of the area.
Because one of our local authors, Musharraf Ali Faruqi, says this, and I've re- I've repeated this multiple times, that when it comes to storytelling, the first job a story has is that of entertaining. And if you can't maintain that, don't expect kids to read something, or in force something for them to, they should like Urdu uh, novels or Urdu writing, or for in this case, as we're talking, the local traditions, just because they exist. If they don't entertain, or if they are not like modernized to their taste, it's gonna go away. And I think unfortunately that is happening ac- across the country, and this is something that uh, the powers to be really need to think about, but they are not. Um, uh, as you said, you're right. There's this, one of the key things in our culture, I think, is this lack of balance of responsibilities. uh, I don't know, the hardcore patriarchal ideas of how the chores need to be divided. Yeah, not just the household chores, but just overall. There's a lack of partnership when it comes to a household, and that has a lot of problems. Um, I think this is a discussion that we can, go on and on about, and we will have multiple sessions on it, because while having this conversation, I have a few ideas for you for your next visit to Thar, and maybe we can, do something and then put it on Mixtape's platform.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
before closing, because the way you said that you, when you had free time, used to go and talk to the local people and everything. um I would, and I know mental health is also a subject that is very close to your heart, and it is something that I have also been sort of looking into, trying to understand, and specifically during the pandemic, and because of some of my personal experiences recently. So just share how, going back, connecting to the roots, how has did I'm not saying it is a cure for mental health, but there is no, you can't say that XYZ can be called a cure for mental health. But how did it help, sort of de-stress, relax, connecting with the culture, you know? if you have anything to share on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. So my job was very, very duty extensive. And by that, I mean both on the computer and deadlines. Sometimes we would have meetings at 2 a.m. Sometimes someone would call a meeting at 3 a.m. It was really like, very time extensive. Um, Although I really loved it, I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I really respect all of the people that I now look back and those are my mentors, my bosses and the higher up, senior management and everyone. And I have so much respect for that. But having said that, it was not an easy job because from the whole day you spend the whole day in villages, doing community mobilization, and then you're overseeing the schools, and you're overseeing kind of the hospital building, and you're overseeing different people, and then you're bringing people in to come and visit her and see their how they can potentially help you, whether they're part of NGOs and stuff like that. And then you want to come back, and you feel the most you feel at times a lot of disconnection, because you're coming back from real villages, from real everything, and you come into this fancy place, which is just, you have a flat screen TV in your room, or you have like, a great buffet lining up at dinner. And while that's all okay for, all the people that stay there and that work not very far from there, that work on the plant site, that work in the office in Thar, for me, my job was very different because it was like I was living a dual life. So yeah, in terms of mental health, I really, really thought there were some times that I would want to leave Karachi just to get some rest. And every time I would feel, okay, my mental health is getting to a point where I'm stressed out, there's too much work, even though there was double the amount of work in Thar. But just it didn't feel like work, because it felt like connection, it felt like identity. I feel like you just lose yourself there, you lose your sense of time there, you're more mindful of what's around you. You look at the sunset, you look at the rain, if it does rain, you look at each plant. Time just slows down. It's like you're going back 200 years in time. And it just it's that that necessary kind of break that you need, like, just to look around. I think that's exactly what Thar became to me, and also a huge amount of freedom, personal freedom that I associated with Thar. That this was my place, and that this was my kind of habitat, and it was my safe place, and it was something that I could explore endlessly and feel free there. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in the rat race that at least is Karachi, that we don't really find solace in like late night drives, or in just walking into a village, or someone treating you, and someone on a bad day, no one has any idea that you're having a bad day, but they will give you so much love that you just forget that you're having a bad day, because you feel worthy and you feel valued. And I think that's the one thing that really, really has stuck with me. And that's what brings me back to Thar every few months, that I so much love, again, so much affection, so much unconditional. They don't ask anything from you. Just ask for your time. In Karachi, you can't ask a friend for your time or too much of it, because everyone's busy doing their own thing. And I think it's great that these people still know the idea of sitting together and talking and spoiling somebody and being hospitable. I think that's what you lose when you're in a bigger city.
Yeah, true. I think these cultural nuances, I think, which I won't, they are becoming nuances, as something that um we need to really preserve, and not just for the sake of some novelty purpose, or just for the sake of preserving them and then marketing them and for tourism or whatever. But I think everywhere around the world, with everything that's happened, not just the pandemic, but in general, I think people have started to realize, as mental health awareness has increased, that all this rat race that we have sort of gotten ourselves into is is not really a healthy way of life. So
Yeah.
people are now around the world, maybe even with there are conversations specifically in, I think, the Scandinavian countries have actually implemented this, shorter work days, work life balance, and not by work life balance, not just from the aspect that you have more free time to do chores of the house, that you are sort of cramming them into Sundays, but just to have there is a bigger meaning to life than just working, and then maintaining a specific lifestyle or socializing. So yeah, on that note, I would like to thank you and close this. And I think we will end up making stories from Thar and other other
Absolutely. Yeah.
adventures a regular feature at Mixtape. So until next time, um, and everyone, thank you for everyone for joining in.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And honestly, I haven't shared so much about Thar now that I now feel like going there. So yeah, there is that cavity when I haven't gone there for a while, and all this has brought up a lot of memories. So maybe I will take a trip there sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye, Fatma. Take care.